Okay, so my topic is climate change denial, and in this Prezi I will go through what climate change is, why it's occurring, what role the greenhouse effect plays in climate change, sea level change, reasons for climate change denial, and an interesting view I found about the Christian approach to climate change. So the causes of climate change is when fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and natural gas are burnt, they release CO2 into the atmosphere. Because of this, the layer of the greenhouse gas is getting thicker, which in turn is making the earth warmer. The ongoing unlimited burning of fossil fuels is what is causing the climate to get warmer. So the greenhouse effect is shown in this diagram, and through the burning of fossil fuels that I mentioned in the last slide, coal, oil, and natural gas, we are creating an enhanced greenhouse effect that is more likely trapping outgoing thermal radiation. Incoming shortwave solar radiation, which is known as sunlight, is initially able to pass through the greenhouse gas layer, which is composed of carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and water vapor. That sunlight is then absorbed by the surface of the planet and re-released in the form of long-wave infrared radiation, which is known as heat. Unlike sunlight, infrared heat radiation is partially absorbed by the greenhouse gases, which do not allow it to pass back through. This is the greenhouse effect that has maintained the planet at an average late Holocene temperature of 59 degrees Fahrenheit. Without the greenhouse gas layer, the Earth will cool into a temperature that is slightly below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, the freezing point of water. However, as we add more greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, carbon dioxide, the greenhouse effect is enhanced and the planet will warm. So the China and Paris Agreement is initially the Paris Agreement is an agreement to limit global warming to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels by the end of the century, but is not legally binding. The main purpose is to reduce carbon emissions on a global scale. The chart I have here shows how much carbon has been emitted from 1970 to 2012 from the countries of China, India, the United States, and the EU 28 is the European Union, which is composed of 28 countries. Since the 2000s, tensions have developed between China's position on its global environment obligations and expectations of the internal community. The root of this issue was how to assign fairly the responsibility of carbon emission reduction between developed countries and China with its fast-growing economy. Some critics from the United States argue that China's efforts have not matched its increased economic strength and corresponding responsibility for climate change. At the Copenhagen conference in 2009, China was also accused of blocking a more substantial agreement from being reached. China's intention to seal a meaningful deal in Paris actually became apparent on its climate diplomacy ahead of the conference. For one thing, China has engaged in a number of bilateral agreements on climate change and clean energy with Germany, the United Kingdom, France, India, and more importantly, the US. The cooperation was realized by a major shift in the politics of the two countries' favor of carbon emission cuts. In relation to the Paris Climate Summit, China also submitted a detailed sheet reduction targets and reaffirmed its intention to peak carbon emissions by 2030 and reduce carbon intensity from 60 to 65% from the 2005 levels. So sea levels have been rising and more storm surges have been occurring due to climate warming and glaciers melting. A good example would be Hurricane Sandy, which occurred October of 2012. there was 43 people in New York who died. Around 6,500 patients had to be evacuated from hospitals and nursing homes. About 2 million people went without power for days, and about 1 million children were unable to attend school for a whole week. With increasing sea levels, there is a higher likelihood of the reoccurrence of extreme hazards, which also results in increasing loss of people before the end of the 21st century. It is found that there will be around a 6-foot increase of water levels by the end of the century. Risk plays a role in this, which is where the chart comes in, because it is the potential for future losses in a given region. It is measured by the probability of something bad happening times the magnitude of the consequence. People are constructing a risk management plan based off hazards, exposure, land use, urban planning, and zoning. And in order for sea levels not to rise, people need to plan out the best ways to minimize the increased flood hazard that could destroy the current built environment. So here's where my whole topic comes in. A lot of people who deny that climate change is occurring are called skeptics. They are known as skeptics because they are denying the knowledge or rational belief that has been proven and found to be true. All around the world, there are skeptics of climate change, and a main reason people are denying climate change is because they don't believe in the mainstream science behind it. People are also skeptics because there are significant inconsistencies between the surface temperature data and satellite data. They believe that the upper atmosphere will become drier as it warms, which results in water vapor acting as a negative feedback rather than a positive feedback. Also, a lot of skeptics are saying that climate changes are due to natural causes like changes in solar output or other forces that have nothing to do with people. I did find an interesting survey by the Pew Research Center in 2009, where the U.S. found that 84% of all scientists agreed that the Earth is getting warmer because of human activity, and it was found that around 30% of the public doubted the scientific survey. So I found a really interesting article on the Christian look at climate change, which is also denying that it's occurring. The basic propositions advanced by the Alliance are the recent warming of the planet has been very modest. The significant additional warming is unlikely, and the recent climatic changes are mainly due to natural causes, not human actions. Accordingly, efforts to stop global warming are likely to be largely futile. It is also argued that adaptation is a more sensible and cheaper strategy than mitigation. They believe it does not seem that God would set up the world to work in such a way that human beings would eventually destroy the earth by doing such ordinary and morally good and necessary things such as breathing, building a fire to cook or keep warm, burning fuel to travel, or using energy for a refrigerator to preserve food. Needless to say, it is presupposed fundamental harm to other species or the planet. It is hardly surprising that the capacity of human beings to affect the Earth's climate system will be seriously questioned. From a Christian perspective, human beings have a God-given duty to care for the created order and to be good factors of our collective inheritance, which is the earth. And they see it as an amazing and precious gift to be nurtured and treasured, not damaged, plundered, and defiled. A proper ecology of the resurrection, in other words, recognizes that God's plan for the planet involves continuity and restoration, not discontinuity, continuity and destruction. It involves the eventual marriage of heaven and earth, and Christians are therefore denying that humans would ever harm this planet. And that is the end of my presentation.